You're probably one of the reasons why we have a Starbucks in every street in Shanghai, at least.
I often think that a lot of Starbucks' success in growing internationally was because
the brand is the same wherever you go. And even though the operations and the markets are different, you've been able to keep a global brand. How were you able to get that to work?
it goes back to two things.
You're one that can predict the future. There's many times I've had conversations with you about this is coming and then it happens. So particularly in this space, the skincare cosmetic space, what do you see as 2024 trends?
In beauty and most other things, Chinese consumers are some of the...
We recently sat down on our first live audience podcast with top investor and CEO of BrighterBeauty, Jessica Gleeson. Jessica helped build the foundations for success for Starbucks to grow from 0 to over 6,500 stores in China, entering into a nation of tea drinkers who drink a lot less coffee than what we do in the West. We discussed how coffee and cosmetics has exploded in China, how you can take a small or global brand, localize it without losing the company identity, and how you can grow quickly in the Chinese market. She also shared a company which may surprise you as changing the business landscape and what's in store for us in 2024. Here's our chat with Jessica Gleeson.
Welcome to the Panda Profits Podcast. Very nice to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here.
We have Jessica Gleeson, CEO of BrighterBeauty, a personal friend of mine, and I've learned so much from you since meeting you. And can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Jessica Gleeson. I have been in China, working here off and on since 1999. A little bit. Came over originally with a small coffee company from Seattle, little green logo. And my background was really growing up with them. So I started working with them when they had 50 locations in the whole world, and left after we had grown to 55 countries. And I always think I was very lucky to get to be part of that early international team, taking a brand from market to market to work cross-culturally, but also seeing the really early beginning of economic development and cross-collaboration between China and international brands. So I'm really excited that you guys are here telling stories about what's going on in Shanghai today.
I think you are definitely someone who's perfect for this, because what we want to get is, practical. We try to avoid being too theoretical and too broad picture, how to get things done. And I mean, you've been boots on the ground here the whole time, right? So.
Yep. And I come out of operations, so I'm very much, how do you move the needle? How do you shift performance? And how do you deliver the best of what your brand aspires to be in the market?
Can we dig into the green logo company and what you did?
Sure.
Because can we say that you were instrumental? You laid the foundation and the groundwork. You're probably one of the reasons why we have a Starbucks pretty much in every street in Shanghai, at least, and also why when you walk into Starbucks, there's that customer service, there's that training, and you were one of the pioneers of this in China. So be great to hear what happened in the early days and how you built that fantastic foundation here in China.
Yeah. So I think Starbucks as a brand got very excited about China very early on. I think we were lucky to have some great joint venture partners. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that when Starbucks entered the China market, we did it in collaboration with strategic business partners who were operating in the market, who had experience in China, and that it was a strong cross-collaboration between their China expertise and our expertise with the brand of coffee. I often think that a lot of Starbucks' success in growing internationally was because we were very passionate and committed about our brand and our quality standards and our service standards. But we were also humble enough to know we couldn't learn how to be an amazing brand in Korea, Thailand, Philippines, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, China, all of Greater China markets as fast as we wanted to. So we were really lucky to get to work with some just amazing strategic partners. And then on our brand side, we also knew that choosing a partner that shared our core values was so critical to our success, because you can't write a resource manual long enough to tell what people to do in every situation. And by the way, we don't actually want to do that because we've hired smart people to be smart, not to just follow a checklist for us. And so I think that one of the things that differentiated the brand is once we chose the strategic partner, we actually had a very thorough immersion program where our JV partner would be required to select the first 5 operating partners for the market and send them to Seattle for 12 weeks worth of immersion training. And if you were going to be the head of operations or the head of HR, we would put you through 2 weeks of barista training and 2 weeks of shift supervisor training. And then we'd put you through all the management training, working in the stores every day. So it wasn't until the 3rd month that people who were in this immersion program got to start working with their functional peers, because we really felt it was important that people understand the DNA of the brand and the DNA of the type of service environment we were trying to create, both for the customers, but also really for the employees, which we called partners, who are working on the team.
The proof is in the pudding. Because when I first came to China, there you had Starbucks, you had Pacific, you had, what was it else? A couple of other brands, Costa and so on. And right now, of those that were there then, Starbucks is pretty much the only one who's still here and dominating the market. They're not gone, but Starbucks have definitely done a better job. And going on that, because one thing that I really admire is that the brand is the same wherever you go. And even though the operations, like you said, and these markets are different, you've been able to keep a global brand. This feeling of the brand and the sort of the way that you would interact with it would be the same if you went to Europe or US or China. How were you able to sort of cross that and get that to work, if you could touch over?
So I think it goes back to 2 things. One, I think, Howard Schultz always impressed on us that success is not an entitlement. You need to earn every customer every day with every transaction. And that's whether it's coffee quality or how warm and engaging the staff is. Our mission as a company at that time was to inspire and nurture the human spirit. Like, that was literally our call to action. And then we had a mission statement that supported it. But I think that with each market that we went into, there was a bit of a conversation around how do you flex the brand in the right way for that market? Because I remember when we went into the Korean market, at that point, Seoul had 10,000 coffee bars already, which is more than we have in Shanghai right now. But they were all smoking. And we said, actually, no, we need this to be a non-smoking location. We want customers to be able to smell the coffee and get the aroma. And so working with that JV partner to understand the why behind that. I think in China, when we first entered this market, one of the things that was fascinating when you look back on it now is that the type of service culture that we're all so used to experiencing here in Shanghai didn't exist. I mean, at that point, wait staff was pretty invisible, right? They literally wore numbers instead of names. So if you went into a restaurant, everyone would have a number and they'd be like, hey, server 27, right? Very, if you think about us as a brand having such high values about the human experience, that wasn't going to work for us. And so finding a middle ground where people who didn't want to put their family names on their name badges, but were able to find a nickname that they enjoyed having at work that they put on their name badges, that was that middle ground. But also finding ways to bring customers along on that journey. So one of the things that was intuitively happening is, for us, part of the magic of the brand was the banter and the theater that went back and forth over the espresso bar in the US. I mean, our customers said, this is my Starbucks. I have 2 Starbucks, my home Starbucks and my work Starbucks, right? Because we built such deep relationship with the customers. And that was something we wanted to be part of our China experience. But I think at the time we entered the market, that was a new experience for people on both sides of the counter. So looking for ways that we could build that behavior to lean into that experience. And so one of the steps that we did in the training material, and I often tell this story, is it was back when we had the manual espresso machines, the La Marzocas, and you'd put the group up in the espresso machine, and you need to push the button to start the brew. For the China market, while we were learning to build banter, we actually asked the baristas, we added an extra step to the operations manual, and we said, press the button to start the espresso shot, and then look up and make eye contact and make some comment to the person you're making the drink for. And it could be just as simple as, are you having a latte? Oh, are you having the mocha today? Oh, that's one of my favorites. Or I'm working on your cappuccino foam right now. It's going to be delicious. Small pieces that reinforced the product, because you have to remember the product was new to everyone at that point in time, but also a way to make safe conversations and to show we were creating a different experience in the market, and also making sure that we left every customer with a human connection. So when we handed off a drink, not to just put it on the counter and say, thank you, that's a transaction, but making sure that when the drink was handed off, it was handed off with eye contact. Even if it had to be on the counter for safety, we would hand it off and say, xie, thank you, right? To the person, not to the counter.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something I have to say I admire Starbucks for in general, because it's usually used as an example of bringing from commodity to product to experience. Because the whole economy is sort of like coffee. Sure, you can buy the coffee beans, and that's a commodity you do yourself. And then you can grind it, and you can try to make it nicer, and then it becomes a good product. But then what Starbucks really have done is taking sort of jumping over the step where, I'll make the coffee for you, and then I will make the coffee for you, but I'm going to also make it pleasant, and I'm going to think about the whole experience and the journey that you're going through. And that is, one of the best use cases for it.
Do you feel that's been lost in the last few years with Starbucks and a lot of coffee brands? I mean, another example would be Manna. From my observation, I'm purely speaking anecdotally, I noticed when Manna first launched here in China, which has become a phenomenon, people would say good morning, they would hand you the coffee, they'd make eye contact. Has that been lost with a lot of coffee brands in the last few years?
Well, I think one of the things that's always interesting is, I think when we started, it was so noticeable because no one else was doing it, right? And for me personally, I'm so pleased to see brands like Manner and brands like M-Stand coming up in the market with innovation and with new design and getting more people drinking coffee. This may not be a popular opinion, but I think, one of the coffee brands in China that doesn't get as much credit as it should is actually KFC and their K-Cafe coffee, because that brand turned coffee into a daily habit for a huge part of this population. And I think that one of the things that maybe if you're outside of China that you might not be aware of is that traditionally coffee in China has been a PM consumer experience. It wasn't what you had on the way to work. It was what you had for the tea break or after lunch. And it was an occasion you'd go down to have that deep, thoughtful conversation with somebody. And bit by bit, as KFC put it into the morning set, and KFC in China did a brilliant job with those morning sets that really matched local cuisine within a KFC format, then coffee, that grab-and-go coffee became such a daily habit that I think they're the ones that really paved the way for the groups like Luckin and Manner that were wanting to offer that sort of lower priced coffee at that entry point in the market. So I think, Starbucks gets a lot of credit and should for bringing that sort of top-end experience with coffee to the market. But I also think there's plenty of credit to share around. And I think KFC, because they paired it with meals that fit into people's daily life, should also get a pretty good nod on the growth of coffee in China. But I guess one other thought is really that we're still at the really early days of coffee in China. But coffee consumption in China is still, as a nation, is still at I think it's something like 12 cups annually. The new CEO of Starbucks was talking about it in a recent investor versus the comparison number in the US, which was in the multiple hundreds. So there's a bright future for coffee in China. Don't let anyone tell you that that is not the case.
Yeah, no, and I think just to compare, because sometimes you see, in US or especially maybe in Scandinavia, because we drink a lot.
We do.
Where I think in Scandinavia, we're between 800 to 900 cups of coffee per year on average.
Yeah.
If you look at Hong Kong, the last numbers I saw is 250 cups per year on average. And then if you compare that to the mainland, where you're on 12, the growth potential of coffee is just tremendous.
Yeah.
So it's a great market. One of the sort of questions that I would like to pick your brain about, which I think is very difficult, because you guys have been good at taking a product, getting it into market, adapting it locally without losing what the product is. And that's something that a lot of brands are struggling with, because it needs behavior change. You need to get people familiar with it. So it needs to be familiar enough that you would actually buy it, but also it needs to be still your original product. Do you have any tips or ideas on how do you keep that balance when you're trying to bring in a product or a service?
Yeah, and I think it's a good call out, because generally I think you see brands fail in China because they either over-adapt or they under-adapt. And I think for a brand going into any country, you need to know what your non-flexible products are in your product lineup. And that's true whether you're a fashion brand or an F&B brand. You know, I think the classic examples, if you go anywhere in the world, McDonald's French fries pretty much taste the same, right? And they do that very intentionally, and then they flex other parts of the menu for local flavors. One of our learnings early on as we were expanding in international was originally we thought everyone should have the same food program. You know, we've got, American muffins, we've got cookies that back then, they're smaller now, but back then they were about this big. And that's what you should have in the pastry case for breakfast. As we learned and grew, we learned a couple things. Yes, there should be a few signature products because people want those in every market. So anywhere you go in the world, I think you can still find a blueberry muffin at Starbucks. I don't work there anymore, but as a customer, the blueberry muffin's still out there. But then other parts of the pastry case, they've done a lot more flexing with, right? Coffee drink standards are the same everywhere in the world, right? They'll throw out your shot if it sits for more than 10 seconds because of product quality. But what flavor we put in a limited time product, that's where the flex is. And same thing with the food program. When we were working to figure it out, ultimately at the end of the day, we landed on this idea of a coffee house food. So giving our joint venture partners who knew the local market, who knew the local flavor palettes, the right to explore as long as the food was at the level of the coffee and that it was a good pairing for coffee house food. So no popcorn in Starbucks, no seafood pasta, those overwhelmed the coffee. But if you could find something that paired locally, I think we got smarter as we grew around choosing those signature items, limiting that menu a little bit more, and then providing more autonomy and creativity to the local partners that are running the markets. And I think, there's amazing food that I've had all over the world, but I also think the same is true for brands that haven't done as well in China. So I think Dunkin' Donuts is probably on its second or it's on its third, I think, run through China. And I always feel, as someone who grew up my grandparents are from the Northeast, that Dunkin' Donuts, the people that have brought Dunkin' Donuts to China haven't fully honored the heritage of that brand. You have tens of thousands of folks in this market that went to university at Ivy League schools, right? They know Dunkin' Donuts from late night. Dunkin' Donuts is a treat occasion, right? You don't go when you're going to the gym. That's not when you get your Dunkin' Donut. You go when you're looking for something sweet and yummy and a little bit decadent. And I think for some of the partners, they asked Dunkin' Donut to over-adapt, and they said China doesn't like sweet, which in general is true. But if you think about how sweet some of the fruit teas are, there's a room for a sweet product and there's room for sweet occasion. And your 8 signature products like the Boston cream, that should be the same everywhere in the world.
On that one, there's one thing that I have noticed, because I get this a lot. China don't like sweet. Chinese people don't like to eat sweet food. I have done a lot of sweet food in China. It goes very well. So I challenge that whole notion, because we have times where we work with chocolate and then we're giving chocolate samples. No, I don't need it. It's gone before the meeting's over. So I don't think that's true. I think it's sort of a mentality.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there are plenty of sweet occasions in China. They just come in different shapes than what we might be used to at home. But, if your product signature, like I don't see gummy bears, which have done a great job of penetrating the China market. They're just as sweet here as they are in Germany.
So post Starbucks, you've launched a number of brands. You've got BrighterBeauty. Could you expand a little bit on that as well?
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of different brands, both inside China and outside China. I am a bit of a scale junkie. I split my career between being in the performance system side, building operations, tools, learning and development programs, the things that you need to design with high integrity centrally so that you can get consistent execution when you decentralize and when you roll your business out across the globe. And on the other side, I've spent a lot of time on the operations side, driving P&L performance and results. So after in my post-Starbucks days, the reason I moved to a new adventure is because I wanted to stay in China. And so I had the great opportunity to be part of Disney English as we were growing that, which was an English language learning program designed to help kids speak confidently within their own voice. And then BrighterBeauty was a project where we basically had a piece of technology and a white piece of paper, and it was build a beauty brand from nothing. And we did just that, and thinking about all the touch points that the consumers go through. And with BrighterBeauty, our goal was to be high tech, high touch, and to be able to provide a beauty treatment to people who make data-driven decisions all day long. So integrating and toggling back and forth on the consumer experience between the technology and the human experience. And we were really, really intentional about that because we believe that's how consumers act in any conversation these days. And so we built those consumer behaviors into that customer journey.
With you, Jessica, you're somewhat of a modern-day business Nostradamus, I'd say. You're one that can predict the future. There's many times I've had conversations with you about this is coming and then it happens. So particularly in this space, let's say the skincare cosmetic space, what do you see as 2024 trends and what's coming up and what you need to be aware of? Because both myself and Simon are countering a lot of these kind of companies. They're entering China or they've been in China and they haven't quite got that traction off the ground. So what would be your advice for them?
I think in beauty and most other things, I think Chinese consumers are some of the smartest, most educated, most researched consumers on the planet. And so I think one advice I'd have for anyone in beauty is, one, make sure you follow all the regulatory rules because it's ugly if you don't. But seriously, that's really important. And understand what claims you can and can't make, but also make sure your product delivers on what you say it's going to do to the consumer. Because if it doesn't, the person's friends will have already posted on Red about being disappointed in the product. So be really intentional in your product design so that it can deliver against that brand promise that you're making. I would say, as far as looking to the future, what I always get excited about is when you find that intersection between macro policy that's coming out from the central government. Anything that shows up in the 5-year plan, I think, is important to pay attention to because it will get funded. It will have priority put behind it. But also those micro level behavior shifts that individual consumers are doing. And so, like, one of the spaces I'm super excited about coming from the Pacific Northwest is this the intersection of personal fitness and investment in national parks. Because I think right now we're seeing people dip their toe into things and saying, okay, I'm going to do glamping, I'm going to go on city walks. But you guys, that is just the precursor to when these national parks start opening up. I mean, I think it's in the last 5 years that people in China have started taking road trips, right? I was talking with a car company here. How do you introduce the idea of a road trip to people? Because like we all grew up with them, but it's something new to just get in your car and drive to the middle of nowhere and pull out some great chairs.
Yeah, we're also seeing it in sort of the way that they are actually trying to put this into commercials. And it's a difficult balance because you don't want to make it look like, oh, this is a rough car for outdoors. You want to have that glamping feeling. And I mean, I think, I don't know about you guys, but at least in Scandinavia, glamping is not really something we want to do. We want to do proper camping. But here you have to have this kind of balance. And then one of my staff just went on a road trip, actually, driving all the way down from Ningbo to, I think, is Fujian to Xiamen. And they slept in the car because they got from the car, the company provided them with like mattresses and the whole shebang, and they got a kit for doing it. And I think brands need to kind of, it's an opportunity at least to embrace this kind of environment and this thing going on, because you can get a lot of attention if you become part of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also understanding to meet the consumers where they're at in their own journey. So I was, along the river, everyone's out with their cute, like literally, Costco carts full of camping gear that they roll from the street, pull out of a beaty and sit on the river for the day with a great setup for making tea. I grew up on an archaeological site, so kind of rough camping, but to me that gets exciting because people are willing to go out to national parks even though they're crowded right now. But as the government opens up more national parks, and I know Shanghai is going to have, I think, 220 new pocket parks rolled out in the next 2 or 3 years, getting people outdoors and out doing activities is partly tied also to health and wellness and the government's commitment to invest in and support health and wellness, which dovetails so nicely to shifts in individual consumer behaviors coming out of the pandemic and COVID, where people started putting a lot more focus on it. I also think generationally, people are valuing their time a lot more and looking at, so if you look at sort of shifts in social media, maybe 10 years ago, it was all about a purse. Like I got my LV purse, I got my Dior lipstick, and over time it shifted from purses to food. And in the COVID and post time, you're now seeing I'm out in the middle of nowhere. So, and I think that's great.
I just one quick thing I would like to add there. Like one of the trends that at least we are seeing very strongly on that is that it's been going exactly like this. And now the last sort of thing that is coming in is time. Is that you can show off that I'm having extra free time. I have time to take care of my health. I have time to go glamping. I'm doing so well that I have time to spend on other stuff. And that is something that we're seeing a lot of, at least.
Yeah, and I think maybe I would frame it as a former time management coach. I think I would even reframe it as what people are choosing to invest in has changed, because time in any day is the same. But I'm choosing to invest my day in spending extra time with my family or going on a walk with my friend over I'm choosing to invest that hour I don't know, in a thankless commute or a extra hour of work for something because staffing wasn't planned correctly.
Quick takeaway, Simon.
I think one of the absolute biggest part that I would take away from this is this: you have to be careful with the adaptation of your brand or your product or service to the market. You can do too little adaptation, so people won't buy it, people won't understand it, but you can also take it too far so that you lose your brand identity. And I like the way that you guys are doing it. Like, okay, it's fixed and it's flexible. So this is the things that we can change. These are the things that has to stay the same to keep the identity. Because, I mean, that's one of the struggles for a lot of brands and a lot of products. How can you get people to use this while still maintaining the value of a brand? Because you have, like you said, a bunch of people like we talked about before who come from, I studied in the UK or US or wherever, they know your brand. Where they come and see it here, they want the same experience. but it has to still meet local expectations.
Customer is king, I think, at the end of the day. And you need to be aware of this phenomenon in China with the glamping. In the UK, we love a bit of glamping. We're not like the Scandinavians. We love, the ladies love to put on the makeup and wear their wellies and then get out there and the music festival. So that ties in quite well. Where can people get in touch with you, Jessica, if they want to find you and pick your brain?
Yeah, so I am passionate on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. Warm smile. Jessica Gleeson on LinkedIn, or on WeChat, it's J Gleeson, JGLEESON.
Thank you so much for today. I've really learned a lot.
And thank you for squeezing me in here at TechCom. And it's been a great day. Thank you for the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you again.
Okay, talk to you guys later. Bye.
Subscribe, follow, hit all of the nice buttons, leave some comments. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.